Congressman now. Welcome, Congressman Welch, to the
Hi.
fourth and final component of VECAN Conference 2020. You are closing out a 4-day virtual convening. We are grateful for your time and just, wanted to sort of pivot into you setting, from the important perch that you have, a frame for all of us. We have 70 good folks gathered virtually today on this call that will be recorded for those who I know were interested but couldn't make it. And we are just really looking forward to hearing from you, Congressman, like what's happening from your obviously unique and important perch. And then we're gonna have some time for Q&A and we'll wrap this whole thing by about 1:30. Okay. So we've got about 20-25 minutes with the good Congressman. So people, please put your questions in the chat for Congressman Welch, and welcome, Congressman. And please do know that if you want to see the Congressman's face fully, you can change your view setting up in the top right view hand. But nice to see you, Congressman. Take it away.
Joey, it's really, really nice to be here. I really appreciate all the work that you and Ian did to set this up. In case you haven't heard the news, in 38 days, we're going to have a new president. And I don't think the Texas lawsuit will prevail. But the reason I start with that is obvious. In 38 days, we're going to have a new energy policy. And that new energy policy is going to have the full backing of the president. And it is going to be to accelerate as quickly and as comprehensively as we can the existential challenge we have to bring down carbon emissions to zero and to move to a clean energy economy. I mean, it's breathtaking what it means to go from a person who was a denier that climate change exists to a person who's going to have the most ambitious climate action policy of our lifetime, and it's overdue. So that's extraordinarily important. The fact that he has appointed Senator Kerry, Secretary Kerry, as the global ambassador on this is very, very meaningful. Kerry, as you know, has a very passionate conviction to addressing climate change. He sees it, as you do, as the existential issue of our times. And he actually, I think, by having been the former Secretary of State, is really in a position to cooperate with other countries where we know that all of us have to be in it together. And just as so many of the town committees are working on a common goal, and that is in our own towns, in your town, in my town, to bring down carbon emissions, to find the practical ways you can do that. Button up campaigns, solarization campaigns, weatherization campaigns, everything that is so particular about the step-by-step approach that we have to take to reducing carbon emissions in a very particular place, in a very particular environment. We also need policies nationally, and we need cooperation globally in order to have the huge impact on reducing carbon emissions that we all know we need. So, the past 4 years in Congress with President Trump has really been astonishing, because in the face of the vivid awareness that climate change is real, in face of the incredible scene we've seen with weather, wildfires in the West, 5 million acres in the West, 4 million in California. These sequoia trees that have been around for 3,200 years, literally 3,200 years, burning down. And then at the same time, having record flooding, at the same time, having record drought. I mean, we're dealing with the president and the administration where it's as though those things aren't happening. So in Washington, those of us who've been advocating for the Green New Deal, and I'm a co-sponsor of that, the Thrive Act, have been stymied, obviously, with an administration that is doing literally everything it can to resist the reality of climate change and everything it can to promote carbon emissions and the more fossil fuels and more coal. So I got to tell you that for me, working in Washington, where we went from the Obama administration, where there was a real effort to begin addressing this, to the Trump administration, where we went into full-scale denial, and where, as much as some of my Republican colleagues were willing to work with me on energy efficiency, things that we started when John Copans was with me, it was pretty frustrating. And the hope and the inspiration that a lot of us got, who were carrying on the fight and laying a foundation for the future, was the work that was being done back home in communities like that is being done here in Vermont. Also by many of our companies that understood, even if the Trump administration didn't, that climate change was real and there was the necessity of having real policies that help bring things down. So I'll just finish with a note of real optimism. There is an awareness of a couple of things that I think really can propel us at the national level that you've understood at the local level. Number one, a confident country doesn't deny its challenges, it faces them. Number two, in facing the challenge of climate change, we can build a stronger economy. There's jobs to be had. We saw what happened with Vermont in the increase in jobs related to renewable energy, related to energy efficiency. It's been interrupted significantly by COVID, but the point that we know is that you face your problems. You actually, in the particular steps you have to take to deal with it, you actually create jobs and create wealth. And of course, we reduce carbon emissions, which is absolutely essential. And as we know, we're at or almost beyond the tipping point. And it's not as though when we get to that tipping point with the amount of carbon in the atmosphere, we can just flip a switch because we realize, oh, it's really time to change. So the step-by-step approach that has to be taken at the local, state, regional, global level, we're at least going to have some wind at our back with an administration, with the authority of the federal government that is all in on doing everything that we possibly can as quick as we can to address climate change. So I'll stop there and look forward to hearing your comments and your questions, but not without a final first, thank you for the work that you've been doing over the years. It really, really matters, and is just it's a source of solidarity locally, where people who are seeking a way to do something have like-minded citizens in their town that they can work with. And then, of course, happy holidays and stay safe. Okay, stay safe. Thank you.
Thank you, Congressman, for that context setting from your important perch. We are getting a lot of questions. I would also just note to underscore what the Congressman just said, like, we will capture comments too. So there's a lot of questions. We'll get to as many of those as you can, but we can share the comments and ideas with the Congressman after this as well. It's probably no surprise to you, Congressman Welch, you know this network of doers who've been working with their schools and their municipalities and with lower income Vermonters and with Vermonters in general who want access to the sun to power their homes and their lives. And, you know, the solar sector in Vermont has had a little bit of a setback. There are several questions related to the prospects for renewing the federal ITC for solar, and then also potentially the production tax credit for wind, which no longer exists. And so can you paint a picture for us?
Well,
Ideally,
what's traditionally happened with the tax extenders, that's the term that applies to not just the solar tax credit, the production tax credit, but many other tax credits that always have had a sunset, is that there is an argument that takes place in the House and in the Senate about everybody's favorite, and they make a case for why that has to be extended. It's resisted by others. And at the end of the day, the pattern since I've been in Congress is that they all get extended. So if past is prologue, I think you're going to see the extension happen. I can't guarantee it, but that's literally what has happened in the past. And there's an additional argument here for the extension, because obviously with COVID, it's been a real setback for a lot of the work that we do. I mean, it's been really tough on the energy efficiency folks. There's about 412,000 people who've been involved in energy efficiency around the country who are out of work because they can't get into homes and do that work. And Vermont, it's over 2,000. So having tax credits, including the solar, we're obviously separate from the efficiency, but it's about jobs. And that's, I think, a pretty compelling argument that we've always had that is now intensified. So guarded optimism is my short answer.
Thank you. That's very helpful. There are lots of questions related to weatherization. We know weatherization saves people money, it reduces energy burden, it puts people to work, as you just noted. What does the landscape look like from your perspective in potentially getting dollars into Vermonters' hands and low-income Vermonters in particular too?
Well, the Biden administration has made a specific commitment to try to tighten up and make energy efficient 4,000 homes and weatherize, 4 million, and do weatherization of 2 million homes. I mean, those are mostly tenant occupied. So there's a very significant Biden commitment to 4 million and 2 million. So obviously very, very substantial, particularly compared to the Trump administration.
That's great. That's helpful. There's a lot of interest in the sort of evolving our transportation sector. Some questions here related to rail. I mean, can you speak a little bit to anything you can share about the role of rail in our energy future in Vermont? Bringing back Amtrak was one of the specific questions, and just how transportation issues will show up, you think, broadly.
Well, we passed in the House $1.5 trillion transportation bill and our infrastructure bill, and it included significant greening of infrastructure. Mitch McConnell has blocked it in the Senate, but I think that you're going to see with the new administration, with the Biden administration, renewed commitment there. And rail has been part of it. There's two things I want to say about rail right now. One is COVID has really been brutal on rail, on bus, on mass transit, and we have a COVID-induced crisis just to maintain the system. The financial stress on our traditional urban transportation system and Amtrak has been immense because of the ridership restrictions and the revenue collapse that's occurred. So we actually have to, I believe, come forward with financial aid to stabilize the budgets. This will be incredibly difficult in places like New York City for low-income workers who have always depended on mass transit in order to be able to get to and from work. So that's actually job one. Second, though, is when we get back, quote, to normal, and that's going to happen. We've got the vaccine, and there's a huge task of getting it distributed and then all of us getting inoculated. But the fact is that is something that we can anticipate is going to happen next year. So we want to be on the other side with the transportation plan that includes rail. I mean, rail has obvious advantages because of the significant reduction in carbon emissions. In the House, which is a bit different than the politics in the Senate, we've had a pretty robust commitment to Amtrak and mass transit in trying to do significant improvement. And we had funding in order to do that was in the House passed transportation bill or infrastructure bill that didn't go anywhere in the Mitch McConnell Senate, but is going to have an opportunity to go somewhere. And I think you're going to see with the Biden administration an effort to lead with infrastructure. His focus is COVID and recovery. But part of recovery is finally addressing the infrastructure needs that have been neglected for so long. And that obviously includes mass transit and rail.
There are so many great questions here. I'm just going to offer this last one because you just touched on Mitch McConnell. What does the landscape look like if Mitch McConnell is back at the helm in the Senate compared to other?
Well, it's I'm trying to think of an analogy.
I mean, can
Mitch
anything be
McConnell-
done? Any major legislative initiatives with him at the helm?
Mitch McConnell calls himself the Grim Reaper. All right, this is a real problem. And here's the problem. Mitch McConnell, you just remember famously that when Barack Obama got elected, Mitch McConnell was the Senate leader. And a reporter asked him what was his goal in the next 4 years. And he defined his goal as guaranteeing that Barack Obama be a one-term president. And I found that stunning because, you know, when election comes, some Republicans win, some Democrats win, hard-fought campaigns, but at the end of the election, voters have spoken, and our job, either side, is to try to help make progress for the American people. That's not how Mitch McConnell defined his job. It was to guarantee a one-term presidency. That we've got the same Mitch McConnell, and he will, I believe, be as obstructionist as he possibly can, as he can be, and that is a reason for enormous concern because in the Senate, with the filibuster rule and with the rules of the Senate, where one person, it's the majority leader, literally one person has the authority to decide whether to put a bill on the floor for a vote or not, then that creates enormous challenges for making progress on an agenda. So that's obviously worrisome. And we're going to have to deal with that depending on what the outcome is in Georgia. There's some things that the president can do and undo. The president's going to be able to act very quickly to undo many of the executive orders of President Trump. For instance, like getting us out of the Paris Accords, like rolling back some of the environmental protections against coal burning and methane. So there's a lot of things the president can do. There's going to be a real effort on the part of a lot of us to try to get some Republican support, which we're going to need, especially in the Senate, to pass some of the things that even many Republicans are acknowledging. That climate is a big issue. But we will have an impediment because of the authority that the Senate rules give the majority leader to decide yes or no on whether you vote or not. And in fact, the biggest obstacle we have right now to getting a COVID package, it's not stimulus, it's survival. I mean, it's really tough on Vermonters right now, folks in the restaurant business, in nonprofits, our cities and towns with the revenue hemorrhage. We absolutely have to provide some additional aid so that we get across the bridge to that other side where that vaccine is waiting for us. And once we are healthy and safe, we're going to be able to return to an economy and get a self-sustaining recovery. But I'm afraid that I have to acknowledge that the power that McConnell has and the way he's used it in the past is going to be a continuing challenge for us unless we have a good outcome in Georgia.
Well, fingers crossed. Lots more questions, Congressman, several related to agriculture. Some dismay from folks about the appointment of the new secretary under Biden, Vilchek, but a real recognition about how important the agriculture and let's expand it to our rich, in Vermont, our forest, our farm sector, and the role that they play in, just like the local food movement and in potential sequestration, soil sequestration, really important. Guy Payne asking, encouraging federal agencies to resource scientific data about climate change in the ag sector. I mean, what else can we be doing to really sort of support ag innovators in the role that our natural assets play in this transition?
The ag secretary is going to play a major role in that. And this is what I'll say about Vilsack. He's from Iowa, and it's the big 5 row crops that have dominated. And we've got to change from that, obviously, because what we have to start having as an objective is sustainable local agriculture that's environmentally constructive. With the right farming policies, we know that farming can play an immense role in reducing carbon emissions as opposed to contribute to carbon emissions. So with the Biden commitment to climate, I'm sure that the objective will be for agriculture to make its contribution, and that will require adjusting policies. And there are a number of us in Congress. I served on the Ag Committee for one term and have maintained my connection on those issues and with my colleagues there. But I was talking to Shelley Pingree just the other day, and we were talking about putting together a group of us to sit down with the new committee chair in the House Agriculture Committee, Congressman Scott from Georgia, but I'm sure also with Secretary Vilsack early on to make the case that ag policy can be and must be critical in how we address local economies and how we address climate change. So stay tuned on that, but I really appreciate the focus on it because it has to be a contributor to the solution.
Absolutely. All right, we have a few more questions to get to. So we're pivoting off of the question about restoring science and centering science and facts again in this important work and in these conversations. Also wondering about, like, obviously data is critical to this. It seems to be an important calculation to make to calculate the cost of inaction, and that we should know that as a federal government and as states and cities. I'm just wondering if you can speak to what kind of data you think will be important to making informed decisions, and how do we bring back science and data into these conversations?
Well, I think there's two things. Okay, number one, the Trump policies have not been a function of a lack of data. The Trump policies are all about denial. It's a political decision where his approach to essentially vilifying any of us who wanted to address the reality of climate change was to accuse us of attacking jobs, attacking coal, and attacking coal workers. And that's not at all our objective. Coal workers kept the lights on for us for a long time, and any environmental plan has to acknowledge that the change from a carbon economy to a decarbonized economy has consequences, and some people are going to be impacted by that, and we got to help them out. But it was all a political decision. It wasn't anything related to data. It was just raw political decision in a way for the president to try to get the votes and demonize those of us who were for environmental protections. So that's not a data issue. It's a political issue. And I think the American people have made a decision with 7 million vote victory for President Biden that they want us to address this. Second, the data, where I think it really is essential, is in getting us information about what particular approach to reducing carbon emissions in one place is best, what's best in another place. It's the practical application of the knowledge that we're trying to assemble that will allow us to make concrete decisions about what best to do to get the maximum carbon reductions. So data plays a huge role. But I think that if you start out with the political commitment that what you're doing, you acknowledge that the carbon emissions are a real threat to the well-being of our planet and our societies, then you need the data to help you act. You don't necessarily need all that data to prove what will happen if you don't act. Because frankly, I think people know that. And getting them data in the face of 5 million acres burning out west, in the face of being on the second round of named hurricanes in the Gulf Coast, that's not a data issue. It's like you're going to believe what's before your eyes, or you're going to deny it because your politics don't allow you to accept the reality of the world around us.
Very Thank you. It's really good context and good thinking. I'm going to close with one final question. There are more questions and comments, and I will work with Rebecca to make sure you have access to those, because this is an ongoing conversation. I'm going to close with an important question from Deirdre Holmes, and in particular because it relates to this network of town energy committees and sort of communities and the role that people can play in partnering in this transition. She asks, might there be an opportunity for a job corps focused on weatherization? She asked specifically about sort of funding and training for the climate economy. How can we, is there something like that that's possible?
Yeah, it is. I mean, that's a great idea. You know, there's a lot of us who have been advocating public service opportunity for young people getting out of high school, getting out of college. Partly as a way to pay student loans, partly as an alternative to service. You know, people go in the military to express the service they want to provide to the country. But there's a lot of folks who would like to weatherize homes. They'd like to, you know, they'd like to be AmeriCorps or a Vista, or as we see at foreign service with the Peace Corps. So I like that idea a lot. And I think it's a real opportunity for people to, you'll learn a lot. You know, when I dropped out of college and did, when I was in college and went to Chicago and did community organizing. And I just remember that as such a formative experience in my life. Because I just got out of that little bubble and the world you're in, and you are in a world that you have to adjust and learn how to serve and be effective. So I think that idea is a really, really good idea. I'd be all for it.
Well, great. We will look forward to thinking through that with you. And I think there are lots of great folks in this network who are also thinking about it, and just in general, looking to stay tuned. We are grateful for your time with us here today, Congressman Welch, for what you're doing for Vermonters, especially in these very challenging times. I hope you and yours are safe and well. And we are generally going to close out this 4-day conference.
Well, I want to thank everybody. I really appreciate your work. It's really important. You know, we're all lucky to live in Vermont. We know that. And what major reason we're lucky to live in Vermont is we've got a lot of solidarity around issues that make a difference to the kind of communities that we live in. So thank you for all you're doing.
We sure do. Thank you, Congressman Welch.
Bye-bye.
Have a great day.
And bye-bye.
And I'm going to just wrap us up here briefly, looking at the time. And yeah, just thank you again for the great questions for the Congressman. We didn't get to as many of them as we would have liked, but we'll capture the questions and the comments. Just wanting to wrap up on behalf of all of the VECAN partners who co-organized this event. Special shout out again to Ian and Becca, Sarah, John, Jared, Carolyn, Michelle, all of the partners who helped bring this virtually to you, and to you all for Zooming and hopping in with us, and more so to all you do every day. And we have a lot more work to do. And so we're going to look forward to staying in touch with you all. You'll find a follow-up email from us with more information about where you can access sort of the slides and the presentations and other resources from this 4-day virtual event. We are also going to ask you to fill out a survey. So look for that as well from in your inbox, you know, just to help guide our planning and, you know, sort of our collective work together. And we are always open. I think I speak for all of our partners in VECAN that we are always open to really wanting to hear from you about how we can continue to just collaborate and be in service of our shared mission of clean energy, climate action in an equitable way. There is the chat storm going on. Please do make sure your ideas are dropped there so that can inform our further work and our outreach to you all. Please do take a look at what your fellow Vermonters are saying. And, you know, just wanting everyone to think about what we learned collectively this week, and just stay in touch. I wish we were in the basement of the Lake Morey Resort together, but it's really great to be with you all here today. And we are thinking about ways to continue this connection virtually, potentially even more sort of just consistently on a set day and time. To that end, you'll see follow-up from us regarding January 11th. Please pencil in January 11th at noon for another virtual connectivity moment. We're going to put together an agenda based on what we learned today. Please do continue to reach out and share your ideas with us about where from here. So just a many thanks again for joining us today. Thank you again to my team for all your work, to Ian and Becca in particular for being the technology wizards behind it, and to all y'all, all what you're all doing. So keep on and keep in touch, and you're free from Zoom, at least this one for the day. So have a great weekend all. Thanks for everything. Stay healthy and sane.